What's up, guys? My name is Steven Widani, 5 Tool Sports Science. I got a video breakdown today. Aiden McBride. Let's real quick run through some of his metrics and stuff. So he's 19 years old, height and weight 6 foot, 150 pounds. Let me get this big screen for you guys. All right, there we go. Height and weight 6 foot, 150 pounds. He's topping out at 84 miles per hour. He's got no pain while throwing. He's missing high with fastballs. Some of his stated goals were improve lower half mechanics, stay behind the baseball more, and gain a better understanding of his body and mechanics. So all pretty good goals here. Athletic profile, he didn't know any of his athletic measurements, so think of like sprint speeds, jumps, single leg jumps, broad jumps, etc. He reported 2 strength numbers. He only knew his bench press and his back squat, so he bench presses 145 pounds and he back squats 200 pounds. So right off the bat, Aiden, what I can tell you, bro, at 6 foot, 150 pounds, you definitely have room to gain more lean muscle mass. Okay, so at like 6 foot, bro, you probably want to be closer to that 200 pound mark, at least as much as you can. So you got a lot of weight that you can gain. All right, so with that, having a good strength training and power development plan and a good nutrition plan is going to be absolutely vital for you. Especially if you're like wanting to throw 90 miles per hour or more. It's going to help you, throw harder, and it's also going to help you stay more injury resistant as well. So those definitely, and then just getting up those strength numbers, man, like 145 pound bench, 200 pound back squat, like not bad numbers, but at 19 years old, definitely trying to emphasize getting those to go up, and then having a single leg focus as well is extremely important. So not just focusing on a bilateral approach with deadlifts, back squats, kind of traditional stuff. Pitching is really done on one leg, so aiming to drive up your lunges, split squats, pistol squats. Think of a lot of single leg stuff for strength. And then, building the explosiveness in as well with single leg plyometrics or weighted plyometrics, okay? Let's see here. In the pitching mechanics, we're gonna go through the video. Let's just do that. Let's just go right to the video here, and we'll kind of come back and see if I missed anything. All right, so here's the video. We got you at peak knee height here, okay? What I really like that you do initially here, dude, is ride whatever you want to call it, drift down the mound, ride the slope. Your first initial move of gaining just the linear momentum as you're moving down the mound is pretty dang good. Great job of loading into that backside, holding torsion on that back leg, loading into flexion of the back hip. You do a pretty good job of initially setting up the back leg, okay? The drive leg. Okay, one thing I will mention here is you are kind of biasing some external rotation in the hip. So think about like when a guy's squatting, when like feet go out like that versus like if our feet are right here, you kind of edge them out a little bit to bias some external rotation, allows you to squat a little bit deeper. You're doing the same thing here. So that's not a bad thing particularly, but when you get into front foot strike, as we're going to see here in a second, you might be missing a little bit of hip internal rotation. So that's going to be, a limitation on how you can clear your pelvis. So let's go forward here into front foot strike. Let's see, where is front foot strike? I think that's front footish. Let me see. Maybe not, maybe right about there. Okay, let's call this front foot strike. All right, so you can see back ankle, it hasn't cleared, back hip not fully open. So not terrible job. You definitely are getting some hip to shoulder separation here, but you are pulling this glove side a little bit, okay? So we'll talk about that in a second. But mostly this is where that hip internal rotation can kind of come into play. Ideally, we would want to get that hip to clear a little bit quicker. So what ends up happening here is you're pulling this glove side, and then the hips, as they begin to fully clear, your hips and your shoulders are going to kind of rotate together. So here's where it's like, I would say that your hips fully open, all right? And then your shoulders just kind of rotate along with it. Okay, so what that might look like is like in a kinematic sequence. Ideally, what we would want to see is the graph something kind of like this. So this would be like your hips peak, okay, and then your trunk peaks. That would be an ideal sequence. What yours looks like will probably kind of look something like this, like your hips peak, but then right on top of it, or very similar to it, is your pelvis peaks, and then your trunk peaks kind of like right on top of each other. So it's a sequencing issue of getting you to transfer more energy through the pelvis, and then delaying your trunk rotation a little bit more to maximize that stretch and that torque, that hip to shoulder separation through the core. Okay, so let's go back tiny bit here. Bing, 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 bing. Okay, let's talk about just shoulder rotation now. So as you start to rotate your trunk, just briefly talk about this. Like if this is your scapular plane, right, we're getting a little bit dragged. Your arm is dragging a little bit behind rotation. That can be hard on the shoulder and on the elbow. So that's just like an injury thing to keep an eye on. That is, a biomechanical thing that does lead to more torque and stress on the arm. Okay. Now let's go to see how that arm externally rotates. Okay. External rotation, pretty good. Not a full like 180 degrees, but pretty dang good on your external rotation. That's good. Let's back it up a little bit and now look at this front leg. Okay. All right, let's just call this knee position. Now this isn't going to be an exact science. If the camera's moving or anything, we're kind of cooked. But we're going to look at how your front leg decelerates. So as you go forward, come on camera, there we go. Let's take you right to ball release. So let's call that ball release. You can see from that start point to there, the front leg isn't staying stable. You're drifting, so that can be some bad deceleration there. And then you can see it through ball release, you're kind of just holding flexion on that front leg. A high velocity guy usually will decelerate that leg really well, and then usually they can kind of kick back into some extension of the front leg, so they're redirecting that energy from the ground back up into the trunk, and then that trunk will usually launch forward more into forward trunk tilt. So that would be what's called like front leg extension velocity, okay, being able to really extend that, and then the forward trunk tilt. Both of these really highly correlate to ball velocity, okay? So definitely front leg deceleration and getting a better block on that front side will significantly help you. Now, you were talking about staying behind the baseball more and some of your misses being high. In the biomechanics part of it, this is what I would say might be contributing to that. If you get that trunk to get tilted more forward, you're going to be able to get a little bit more on top of the baseball. Okay, so when you're throwing a little bit more like kind of upright with your trunk, and then you're releasing that ball, it can kind of sail on you a little bit. If you can get a little bit more forward trunk tilt and a little bit more better front leg stabilization, extension, and control, you're not going to be you probably won't be missing high as often. Okay. Let's go back to our notes. I just want to see if I missed anything here. Okay, let's look at your pitching mechanics breakdown, just make sure I covered everything. Okay, back leg and linear momentum, grid initial linear momentum, smooth drift, and solid back leg loading mechanics. Yep, that was good. Foot positioning, we talked about that. Oops, let me get some of this out of the way. We talked about, your foot positioning kind of being open. That's probably showing that you're a little bit more biased towards external rotation of the hip. You might want to work on a little bit of internal rotation. When we got into front foot strike, we could see that to our next point, the hip didn't fully clear, the ankle wasn't completely kicked through. That kind of disrupts the kinematic sequence. It's just not sequenced. The timing might be a little bit off with the hips and the trunk peaking together versus the pelvis peaking first and then your trunk peaking, okay? Yep, so the hips and trunk rotating together rather than sequentially, which causes the arm to lag behind the scapular plane. So that's what we talked about. Some of that sequencing issue can cause that arm drag where your arm was hyperangulating, and we said it was an injury concern. So upper body and arm action, your arm timing at front foot strike was pretty solid. You had good scapular load and horizontal abduction. So when you're hitting front foot strike, Your arm was scapularly loaded pretty well. This is that horizontal abduction. You were pretty horizontally abducted. And you had good external rotation. So your forearm was flipped up at foot strike. You weren't late at front foot strike. So that is good. Then that talks a little bit more about your early trunk rotation. Okay, and then the front leg. So the deceleration on the front leg, which we talked about, the knee drifting, doesn't get any extension. It's going to reduce your trunk's ability to rotate at higher angular velocities, and then it's going to contribute to not as good forward trunk tilts, which possibly contributes directly to the high misses being experienced. So let me get out of the way so you can kind of read this stuff. So some of the mechanical fixes, we can improve some of that dry leg rotation, okay? We can improve some of the hip to shoulder separation, trying to kill some of that glove side pull into front foot strike. I think some of this is just like a timing and a coordination issue for you. So doing some disassociation drills where basically you're gonna work on your trunk going back as your hips going forward. I know you can't see me, but I'm basically rotating my hips forward as my trunk is going back. So teaching your body how to time and coordinate those movements a little bit more effectively. You can do that, with an arm cock as well, where you're getting the hips to rotate forward and you're pulling the trunk back, trying to time that up to where we're not getting that glove side pull, okay? And then improving front leg deceleration and extension, all right? So a lot of that is gonna correlate to what we talked about at the beginning with your training plan and developing leg strength and power. So when you're hitting front foot strike, okay, it's 0.1 seconds until ball release and a ton of force is hitting that front leg. Your front leg needs to be really strong. It needs to be really powerful to stabilize, be a solid base for your trunk to then rotate off of, okay? It's the pelvis is opened, you hit front foot strike, it's solid, the trunk is as closed as possible, and now the trunk is going to close that gap and rotate as fast as it possibly can. And to do that, we have to have a really strong front leg. So I think that's a huge one for you, bro, is fixing that front leg block, getting more powerful there, and then working on some deceleration drills where you can kind of use some overspeed to hit the front leg really fast and get it to stabilize really quick. Think about bands pulling you, etc. So that would be my recommendation, is really emphasize some of that front leg deceleration. And then forward trunk tilt. So I think the front leg is going to directly help you get more forward trunk tilt as well. So next steps, I would say you got to definitely get a strength, power, nutrition plan going to help you gain some weight and start getting some more athletic development. Definitely, I would encourage you to start getting some athletic metrics, sprint speeds, jumping, mobility. That's going to help you better understand your body. That was one of your stated goals. You don't know what you don't know, man. So if you're jumping 12 inches off of your stride leg, that's probably a pretty good indication you just don't have enough power to decelerate that front leg. All right, so that's where assessments are so vital to baseball players. I mean, to any athlete. You gotta know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You gotta know what you need to work on, all right? And that's where assessments are really gonna shine, and that's where getting your athletic metrics is really gonna help you out. Then I would implement a mechanical progression, lower half efficiency, working on the sequencing, getting that hip to internally rotate more, clearing your pelvis and trying to hold more of that separation. That's gonna help out your kinematic sequencing, and then working on that front leg deceleration and trunk tilt. So I hope that helps, man. If you have any questions, let me know. Guys, if you're wanting a breakdown, go ahead, and he just shot me a video through Instagram. Typically what happens is these start piling up on me. So send it in. I'll do my best to get to it. I got to get to all of my paid clients first. If you guys are interested in training with me, go ahead and reach out as well, and we'll see if we can set something up. All right, boys, take it easy.